Hello, folks, and welcome to the weekend warm-up with me and her and him, where she is Laura Winter and he is Lawrence Barretto, and we are inside because the mother of all storms, guys, has just hit the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve on the Ile de Notre Dame here in Montreal on Canadian Grand Prix weekends.
Absolutely bonkers. Lawrence Barretto standing very brazenly and boldly outside saying it's going to be absolutely fine, and then it is pouring with rain. We had a weather alert come up on our phones basically saying if you see inclement weather, take immediate cover. It was incredibly dramatic. So we have done just that and we're inside.
Yes, hailstones the size of baseballs, supposedly.
It's easing, to be fair.
To be fair, it is, but you said it wasn't going to rain at all. So, weatherman Lawrence strikes
It's dripping
again.
as well through the roof.
Yes.
We do get dripped on.
So we may have to be quick. It is wonderful to be back, though, in Montreal. First time since 2019.
Feels like a long time ago that we were last in. Of course it is. It was 3 years ago. But lovely city, great racetrack. There's a bounce list there. They're excited to be here. I can't wait for this weekend's racing. I still think they can.
Of course, we are just 1 week on from the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in Baku. A lot happened, which you can fill us in on, Lawrence, with your 1 minute recap. I don't know if you need a minute or 30 seconds or 15 or 20.
I'll see how I go, shall I?
You ready? Africa, have you got a timer? All right, Africa's got the timer. You ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
Sergio Perez had a great reaction. He managed to get in front of Charles Leclerc, turn into turn one. To be fair, I thought Leclerc did a great job to keep it out of the barriers as he was coming through that first 90-degree corner. As they were for a little bit of time, then Charles Leclerc pitted under the virtual safety car. Why was there virtual safety car? Well, because Carlos Sainz's teammate retired for the third time in 6 races, first retirement on the grid. I've lost myself now. This is a but hang on. So let me think about this. So
you might need a minute after all.
I know. Tell me about it.
What happened? Carlos Sainz retired.
He retired. Right.
Yes.
Both Red Bulls stayed out. Sergio Perez was leading Max, but then Max passed Checo, took the lead from the Grand Prix. At that stage, it was looking okay until, of course, Charles retired. Another engine failure, twice in 3 races. That left at Red Bulls 1-2 with George in third, his 4th podium of the year. Lewis Hamilton, good fight back. He passed Gasly. He made it into 4th. Gasly finished 5th, best result of the season. 6th to Sebastian Vettel, great drive from him. He kept it out of the barriers just, but that was a good result for Aston Martin. 7th was Fernando Alonso. 8th was,
you're really good at this.
Daniel
Ricciardo. Which was great because then Lando Norris was told he couldn't pass him right at the end. He finished 9th, and last points paying position went to Esteban Ocon.
And Lando wasn't too happy, was he, about that? Because of the strategy.
At the time,
he said it was for strategy at the start, and now it's for position. You got to let me fight him.
I think in the heat at the moment, I think he was a bit frustrated. He kind of felt like they'd done something for each other, and therefore by this point they were racing for position. But after the race, he was kind of thinking, well, you know what, if it was for a win, maybe they'd worry about it, but it wasn't. It was faith in 9th.
Huge turnaround, though, in the championship, particularly for Red Bull when you look at their recent run of form. A horrible weekend for Ferrari. I was looking at the stats today. Red Bull, I think, right up at the top of the charts. Ferrari right down at the bottom of the charts now in terms of laps completed this season. Bottom of the pile, bottom of all 10 teams.
It's incredible to think that at the start of the Spanish Grand Prix, Ferrari were, it seemed, light years ahead.
Yeah.
And there's now been this enormous swing, but I think that goes to show that within 2 races, it can so easily, so quickly swing back the other way. And Red Bull have had their fair share of reliability issues earlier on in the season. Yes, it's looking very good for them now, but they of course know what it's like. As Max's engineer said in Baku, which I love the line, we know what it's like to lose a race around here. You stick to 48.0, you do not go any faster. You manage these tyres in this heat. They know what it's like for a race to just suddenly turn on its head. So I don't think they'll be too complacent about it. I think they definitely felt relatively lucky with what happened in Baku. And I think it was a shame for fans as well. We didn't get to see the Ferrari-Red Bull fight that it was so beautifully set up for. Yeah,
the strategy was going to play out, wasn't it, for Charles later in the race. Some comments obviously coming out of Azerbaijan about the bouncing, the porpoising. Drivers complaining after the race. There has been a technical directive from the FIA issued to all of the teams today. Now, it's quite complex and it's actually quite sort of mysterious because the FIA at the moment don't exactly know what parameters they're going to set on the teams. Essentially, the FIA said we need to deal with porpoising. So what we are going to do is we are going to look over the opening practice sessions of this Canadian Grand Prix weekend, and we are going to formulate a metric by which we will determine the vertical movement of the cars. If it is too much, we will impose a limitation. Any team that breaks that limitation is going to have to raise the ride height of the cars in order to get over this bouncing, this porpoising. But there are a lot of question marks around it because Mercedes during the week said in a video that they released, they've fixed the porpoising, completely fixed. The issue for them in Baku wasn't anything to do with porpoising. It was all down to the setup of the car and how they'd set up for Baku. And that actually it was track strikes created by essentially a stiff car, low ride height, and that's what was causing the issue. So the question in the paddock today, talking to everybody out there, is exactly what does this technical directive cover? Is it waveform oscillations as created by porpoising, which is an aerodynamic effect, or is it simply the vertical movement of the cars up and down, which could be created this weekend by what is a very bumpy track and track strikes? The FIA have said it's for safety purposes. If it's for safety reasons, does it matter whether it's by porpoising or by the track strikes? But then how will they determine which is which? Will they need to determine which is which? There are so many question marks at the moment, and we're only really going to know after FP2 and whether the teams try and argue it and try and get out of it. Sam Collins and Craig Scarborough actually had a really great definition of the difference between bouncing and porpoising on Tech Talk. You can find it on YouTube and on F1 TV, on the F1 TV app as well, which goes into that sort of waveform oscillation, because the aerodynamic effect is waveform. It's constant, whereas the track strikes are more random because of the track. It's a really interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what the FIA decide to do going forward, and then which teams that affects and which ones it doesn't. I think you'll see a sliding scale of some people who are probably pretty happy with the technical directors that are coming out and others who aren't.
Yeah. Right, let's move on to discussing this race weekend, and we'll start, of course, with Red Bull Racing. Laura, we were talking about them, a brilliant last couple of races, up at the top of both championships. Their drivers now 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship as well. Yeah,
it's great to see. It's been a great run of form for Red Bull, and obviously what we did hear very clearly on the radio in Baku as well was no fighting. Team orders were clear. You keep it safe, you keep it clean out on track. The importance for them right now is the team and making sure that Red Bull continues to pull away from Ferrari. I think everybody out there would hope at some point we'll get to see Perez and Verstappen actually fighting wheel to wheel and able to do that. But I mean, will we? Is this Max Verstappen's championship to lose? Will they sacrifice any sort of team gain to allow Perez to fight?
Yeah, Lawrence.
Yeah, Lawrence, tell us.
Does Checo need like a multi-21?
Question.
Does he need like a multi-21 moment to show that he's willing to go against the team and fight for himself? Or is he too much in the team mind game?
Oh, no, I think Checo still wants to win. I think he still, feels like he can win the World Championship. But I think he will pick his battles. And I think he realised in Baku he didn't quite have the pace of Max.
Yeah.
And so that probably just wasn't the fight for him. But I don't think that rules it out for, say that happens here. And Checo's performing very strongly. There's no reason why. I don't think he's just going to sit behind. I just don't think he's that kind of driver.
And how does Ferrari now bounce back? Because that was a horrible weekend. They've had the misery of the strategy going wrong in Monaco. Then, of course, the DNFs. Charles, of course, DNFing in Spain. DNFing again from the lead in Baku.
It's been a horrible 5 races, really, for Ferrari. They've only scored 59 points in that time. And you just can't afford to go on a run of races like that if you want to be fighting for not just the drivers, but the Constructors' Championship. And even though the second car has been struggling, Carlos, like I said earlier, 3 out of 6 races DNFing, that's just not good enough for if you want to become Constructors' World Champion. Where do they go from now? Well, I think it's quite good that they've come to a circuit where in the past they've been reasonably strong. If they can kind of just get one weekend of stability, it feels like this downward spiral forming. And if they can just have one weekend of stability, even if that isn't outright wins this weekend, that might just give them the confidence to then start building back up again.
Mercedes, we've spoken about already.
Can I just add
briefly.
one point
on
Ferrari?
Can.
Sorry, Will.
Yeah.
Sam Collins pointed out to me in Baku that Charles Leclerc could be on his 3rd turbocharger within that engine. And that could mean grid penalties at some point this season. If they cannot salvage one of the ones they've already used, I know one is completely written off.
Done.
If they can't salvage one of the other 2, they could be taking a penalty here. They may take that strategically. We don't know, but it could mean more grid penalty woes for Ferrari coming up. Carry on.
Thank you. Mercedes, I know we've already spoken about them briefly, obviously about the setup issues that they had, and they have admitted they went too far in Baku.
Yes, they did. Exactly right. They've both. I think it was quite a strong line as well from James Vowles to say we went too far with both our package and with the position we put our drivers in. It cannot happen again. They sacrificed comfort over, in terms of performance, and they will now have to do, I guess, the opposite to an extent and begin to sacrifice an element of performance to ensure that their drivers aren't actually, comfortable is a stupid word when you're driving around a Formula One racetrack with, the forces that we see out there, the 5G we see out there. But but the drivers to be actually safe and to be injury-free. We all saw Lewis getting out of that car, and nobody likes to see a driver in that sort of state climbing out of a Formula One car. George saying he'd need to have a hot bath, and he's having regular massages, and many of the other drivers in other teams saying that too. So as the rain
comes the rain again.
comes down again.
But they took it as a mea culpa. They said we fixed the porpoising. That was all down to the setup on our car. Toto, though, said that the car was, to Lewis, I can't repeat it on here, but a beatbox. You know, he said it's that. But George took it to the podium, and they never said to George, congratulations, George, you've taken this beatbox onto the podium. Does that show the difference in how they're having to manage their drivers this year?
I think so. I think the difficulty for Lewis and for George at the moment is Lewis seems to be doing the experiments, according to Toto, that are having a negative impact on the performance of the car. And so therefore it's having a negative impact on his running results. And whereas George's side of the car, I guess, it's a little bit more stable. It makes sense to give the more experienced driver, the one you work with for the longest, the tougher experience, really, to get a better read. He's got a better system of data to go through. Tough for Lewis, though, and that's the team boss just trying to do the best thing he can to keep the morale of the driver up.
Let's move swiftly into Alpine. Who wants to start with Alpine?
I've got some stats.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, I've got some stats. I went down to Alpine earlier on and just rinsed Michael, their press officer, and I've got some stats for you. Fernando Alonso is 4 points off a 2,000-point haul in Formula One.
Wow.
Only, of course, Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton have done the same. So potentially a milestone for him this weekend. And 6 out of 8 points finishes so far for Esteban Ocon as well. Things are on the up at Alpine, and they're looking again, of course, it's another low downforce circuit. They're looking again at that skinny rear wing. They're going to test it out on Friday and see how it goes, see if that's, again, a setup they're going to implement for here as well. That's all I got.
They had big changes, of course, last time out in Baku, didn't they, with their side pods. Seemed to play out for Fernando on a weekend where he became the Formula One driver with the longest Formula One career.
Yeah, I think they're very pleased, really, with the quite sizable upgrade package they brought to Baku. I'm interested to see what they do with that rear wing that you mentioned earlier, Laura, because I think the drivers felt that maybe they went a bit too far with the straight line speed there, and they were very strong, top of the pack on straight line speed, but that probably hurt them a little bit more in the corners. So I imagine they'll probably look to tweak that here, because it's a very similar circuit. But I'm very impressed with Alpine over the course of the year. They probably should have more points than the table suggests, or table shows that they've got. But if they can kind of keep building, Fernando's got some momentum. That's key. He's got 3 points in a row, I think. Esteban, he is building as well, but it would be cool if he could step it up as well. He's had a couple of races where he's been a little bit off the pace. But yeah, Alpine, impressive.
McLaren, both cars
Yes.
in the points. Daniel ahead of Lando. Maybe Lando's better when he's ill.
Daniel ahead of Lando, but via team orders.
Yeah.
And I spoke to Lando about this earlier, and he said it's the first time that's ever happened to me. You'll hear more in just a moment. He said it's the first time that happened to me in the heat of the moment. As you said, Lawrence, he reacted in that way as if to say, well, hang on, this is for a points finish here, let me race, you know. And actually he now, I think in reflection, could see why it was done, could understand the decision that was made. But it was a lovely chat actually with Lando, and in which we look back on 2019, which of course was we were last here in 2019, and as a human being, as a driver, as a sort of teenager, almost young adolescent becoming a man, he's grown enormously and developed enormously in that time. And I could see it in his face when I asked the question that he has had a chance in prepping for this one to really reflect on all he has learned. And I think the things that he did not quite so well or not quite so right back then, he's managed to implement well now.
Look at the journey.
Oh, we love a bit of journey. It's
Love
like I'm
the
on
journey.
X Factor.
Love the journey. And Lawrence, Daniel Ricciardo finishing ahead of Lando, slightly starting to unlock that car.
Yeah, I feel like he turned a corner in Baku. Well, as he
Lots
said
of
to me, he
corners.
turned, all right, same gag he told me when I said that to him. But I feel like he was only a few millimetres off being really comfortable. Oh, you're delighted with that. Only a few millimetres off being really comfortable with the car, and I feel like he's starting to make those steps now where it's going to unlock massive potential in himself within that car. So yeah, I'm hoping that is the start of a run of races for him.
Well, we can hear from the man himself, but first, as Laura has already teed up, we'll hear from Lando Norris and then Daniel Ricciardo.
We're coming here after 2 years away, and for you, you're a very different driver, a very different person probably to how you were 2 years ago. How do you look back on that development?
I mean, you know, a lot of the preparation we've done for this weekend is looking back on everything I did back in 2019, and there's a lot of stuff, not a lot, but some stuff like I think, why on earth did I do that, or you know, how could I have done that kind of thing. So definitely a lot of things I can visually see, and I know I've made a lot of progress on. but it's hard to know exactly what progress is in terms of a number from one year to another. But I'm more confident, I guess. That's probably one of the biggest things. I'm coming in here with a lot more confidence than I did back in 2019 in my first year. But it's a fun track. It's difficult. A lot of challenges, bumpy, poor grip and so on. But of course, I'm sure I'll do a better job than what I did.
How competitive are you expecting the car to be over this weekend on this track?
Got no idea. I mean, straights was definitely our weakest area back in Baku. So I'm hoping that's something we can work on and do slightly better. But there's less straights here as well, so I'm just hoping. I think it won't be as much of a problem, and we can take more advantage of the rest of the track. But like 2019 was not a bad track for us here, so I'm hoping we can do a similar job. But yeah, like I said, challenges, bumpy, straights, tight corners. It's not an easy track. A lot of curbs that we used to be able to take, we might not be able to take now in this year's car. So a lot of learning we're going to have to try and put together over the next few days.
We heard team orders over the radio in Baku, of course, telling you to stay behind, Daniel. How is the team dynamic coming into this weekend?
Fine. Yeah, I think it was my first time being in that kind of position. And of course, just because it's my first time being in that position and getting told to stay behind, of course I'm going to question it. It's not something that you always want to hear, but I think we did a great job with what we tried to achieve. Daniel had to stay behind me for a few laps, and that helped me out. And it was the favour in return just to stay behind him at the end of the race. So yeah, nothing wrong with it. I think it was just my first time, like I said, being in that position, and as a racing driver and always wanting to go forwards and race, that's just what I wanted to do. But I completely understood what we tried to achieve and what we did achieve. 8th and 9th was still some decent points for us, and that was our aim before the race. So I'm happy with everything.
Baku, was it the breakthrough to unlocking the car, or is it very much a case of the key just sort of just finding the lock?
I'm normally a very positive and optimistic person, but I don't want to go as far as saying it's a breakthrough, because I think, if this weekend's the same and then maybe Silverstone, then all right, we could say, all right, that was the breakthrough weekend. But I'll need to, let's say, back it up a few more times to be like, that's it. But it was certainly what was the second thing you said? The key in the door.
Keys in the lock.
Let's say that one. I like that.
Okay, cool. I read some quotes from you in the week in which you'd said, obviously, there is
Fake,
still
lies, all of it.
Well, I mean, the direct quotes from you saying that ultimately there are still some traits of last year's car on this year's car. I know this year was supposed to be a clean sheet of paper. Is there a level of sort of, I don't know, any disappointment that those maybe negative traits that weren't so easy to get on top of last year have carried over?
I mean, there is certainly still a bit of it. Yes. So, I mean, I don't want to say disappointment. I don't want to go too hard on that. But it's we're still trying to kind of overcome a little bit of it and figure it out. But yeah, we're okay. I do think that we put in some really good work before Baku, post Monaco, and that translated well on track. So I feel like our understanding of things and where to go moving forward is clear. So yeah, confident moving forward.
And is it about understanding the car or understanding yourself? Because I remember last year you said you'd had to really take yourself apart, put yourself back together to fully understand the car. Have you had to do as much of that in 22 as you did in 21?
I think now we've established what I like, what I need to get it out of the car. So we're kind of at a place now where we're bringing the car back towards me. And at the end of the day, driving with confidence and driving with, let's say, the right feeling is probably the most powerful thing. So just trying to give me that so I can execute at my highest level. And then I think that will get, the car further up the grid.
Now, Sebastian Vettel always goes well at Baku.
Yep.
He did once again, but a less impressive weekend for Lance Stroll.
Oh, really difficult weekend for Lance. He had a pretty dreadful qualifying and the race didn't really get much better. But on the other side of the garage, Sebastian was proving what that car can really do. I know that they're not getting up in the morning. Lawrence Stroll certainly isn't for 6th place in the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, but it just shows how far that team have come since they introduced that sizable upgrade in Spain. Couldn't really see the best of it in Monaco. Baku was a first inkling really of where they are as a team, and it's looking like pushing to the upper part of the midfield.
Yeah, it's been a big turnaround for Aston, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I remember us speaking, I think, in Miami, and Sebastian Vettel saying that the points finish, snatching the last point, I think, in Imola, almost felt like a race victory for Aston Martin. And now we're seeing Sebastian Vettel continuing to push into Q3, continuing to push into the points on a more regular basis. And I think that shows that they are becoming more competitive. But as you mentioned, it's one driver at the moment, and it's not Lance Stroll. And that's incredibly difficult as a driver who's coming to his home race for the first time in 2 seasons, and he's not driving in the manner he wants to. That probably means his confidence isn't where it should be coming in. And it's a home race where he's going to want to do well, and the fans are going to expect him to do well and expect him to put on a show for them. So could be another tough weekend for Lance Stroll.
Talking about doing well, feels like AlphaTauri turned a bit of a corner. Really clean weekend for them. I felt bad for Yuki Tsunoda getting the meatball flag. I don't understand why the FIA gave him the meatball flag when they could have just said, just don't use DRS. It wasn't like it was a huge part of the car that was hanging off the side. I didn't really get that.
Just quick translation, meatball flag is the
So black and orange flag. But it's a big orange circle in the middle of a black. It's the meatball flag.
I felt bad for Yuki because he'd been strong all weekend. He'd been in the top 10 throughout practice.
He did
won
great.
in practice too. He's been super consistent this year. The team have been, when you asked them about him, they said he's just grown up a lot this year. He feels much more comfortable extracting the maximum from him. So it was tough not to get the result. But I think the important thing is, because he's been building, that kind of result would have hurt him last year. I don't think it's going to have the same effect this year. For Pierre, it was just great to see him get a big result, because I think he's been very strong this year, and they just haven't really maximised that package.
Yeah, he's driving like a lion at the moment. You look at his performance in Monaco, overtaking on a track where you shouldn't really be able to overtake. And again in Azerbaijan, superb.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right, Lawrence, that we expected AlphaTauri to have pace, and there's been glimmers and flashes of this brilliant pace that we're hoping to see from AlphaTauri, and now we're beginning to see it. And you're right, I think Yuki Tsunoda could have definitely given them a double points finish. That looked likely, so it's obviously disappointing for him. But Pierre Gasly, right up there, best result of the season. And we met the two of them for some fun Pictionary game on the Saturday in Baku, and it was straight after quali, and they were still absolutely buzzing from it. And Pierre sort of saying, we've had a great day, P6, but whatever, I can't remember what they qualified now, but basically saying, we're both in Q3, we're both up there on the grid. And I think they then actually lost the Pictionary challenge, but I don't think that will phase them
Lost
too much.
the Pictionary challenge, but gained
but have
on the
pace.
Can Pierre translate a brilliant performance in Monaco and a brilliant performance in Baku to a brilliant performance here in Montreal?
No, it was just great. Well executed every session from P1 until the end of the weekend, and that's why I was really pleased, because we've been quite unlucky since the start of the year, not always doing everything perfectly, which cost us a couple of points. But in Baku, I must say the team did a fantastic job. I had quite a peaceful race on my own. I mean, I had Lewis behind for a couple of laps, and a short battle. Unfortunately, I wish it could have lasted a bit longer at the end, but not to score our first top 5 of the year was really good.
You've been driving beautifully all season, but how frustrating has it been to just score points on those 3 occasions?
I mean, it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been it's been quite a slow start, and I must say we've been hit by, as friends will say, probably as much bad luck in the first 7 races than in the last 3 years together. So listening to him, he thinks we should win at least 2 races to balance it out. But no, I mean, sometimes it gets a bit more challenging. I think what's important is just to keep the spirit, keep the mindset, everyone inside the team to really be focused, dedicated. And we don't get the result that we would like, but I was really pleased with Baku, because it really shows everybody, even we may have dropped a little bit compared to last year, it's still possible to achieve a very strong result. So no, it's looking good for the next few races.
Where's that drop come? Because in qualifying, half the races you've been in the top 10. Couple of difficulties maybe in qualifying that meant you couldn't quite get through to Q3, but the pace 1 lap is certainly there. So is it just those little mistakes that are stopping you on the Sunday?
I would say we tend to struggle a bit more on Sunday, just with degradation. We know we are lacking absolute downforce on the car, which is the reason why we struggle on higher speed tracks. And then over 1 lap, I think we can sort of balance it out. But then in the race, lap by lap, you just slide a bit more, hit your tires a bit more, degrade the tires a bit faster, and then you just pay the consequences are bigger over a race distance. So I think that's the main thing. We know we got to improve it. we have some upgrades. As a driver, you always want them now, but with the budget cap, it makes it a bit more difficult. But we know we have a plan in place to improve that in the short to medium term.
Well, can he take a brilliant result in Monaco, or a brilliant drive in Monaco, a brilliant drive in Baku, and turn that into another brilliant drive here in Montreal? Only time will tell. Right, Alfa Romeo, not the weekend that they wanted in Baku, and it was a surprising one.
Yeah, they've had 2 weekends now where I think they've gone to Monaco, then they went to Baku, and they were expecting to be reasonably strong. And they really weren't. Like in Monaco, it's more of a setup issue. In Baku, they were just generally struggling to get the best out of the car. Bottas couldn't, had those problems early in the weekend and couldn't build the confidence as the weekend went on. Joe should have really scored points.
Felt bad for him.
He had a great race.
Yeah.
And I can see his frustration, I understand his frustration on the team radio when he says to the guys, look, we've got to stop doing this. But because it's probably going to hurt his confidence if it keeps continuing. It's not for one of trying.
Yeah, but he is doing a great job. And he's coming
so.
on in leaps and bounds, race by race.
He is. He's really learning. And I think he's got to take the positives from that. If he was in a car that wasn't reliable and also was dog slow, you've got a massive issue. Or equally, he wasn't able to extract the maximum performance from the car. There's an issue. But he's in a car that has pace. He's driving well. The reliability is almost out of his hands, which, as frustrating as that is, it does show that once that's aligned, he's in exactly the right place he needs to be to get the result out of it. But third DNF of the season will be tough to take.
A DNF for Kevin Magnussen as well,
Yes.
after what was looking like a very promising weekend at Haas.
Those Ferrari power units. Reliability is going to be a big issue, I think, as we continue through the season. And again, it's similarly with obviously with Zhou coming in, points on his debut, brilliant stuff. He was in tears coming out of the, into the pen in Bahrain. Again, similarly for Haas, Kevin Magnussen coming out swinging, and it's just begun to become a little frustrating for them. And I spoke to Kevin Magnussen about that, the fact that everything when he first came back into the sport seemed like a bonus, like a gift, that he was back and the car was performing. Now the frustrations are creeping in because he's now, I'm actually a Formula One driver again, and I need results. And when they're not coming, that frustration is going to start to eat away at him. So they'll be looking to bounce back here. But as we say, the Ferrari power unit's obviously not having a great weekend.
And of course, it's one of the few cars to have no major upgrades on it this season.
Yes.
But we have to talk about Mick Schumacher. And it's not an easy question to answer. Gunther, furious after Monaco, said you cannot keep making these mistakes. You cannot keep costing us this much money. He changed his mindset into Baku. In so doing, was massively off the pace. And so Gunther has asked the question coming into this weekend, well, you've got to find a midpoint, because if you taking it safe means that you're going to be slow, but you pushing means you're going to crash, I don't know, should we be asking the question, is this too much for Mick? Does Mick have a future here?
I think he stripped it back too much based on what Gunther told him to do, and he took too much. He left too much margin out there, and you can't really do that in Baku because you'll really feel the time slipping away from you when you do that. The question has to be, like you said, is he good enough for Formula One? And at the moment, he isn't really proven that. Gunther is not going to mince his words with him and has told him on multiple occasions, what the lay of the land is. And now Mick's basically got to the end of this year to prove that he deserves to stay here. I still feel like the jury's out. I feel like last year was, settling in, getting used to life as Formula One driver. This year he's got a car, as Kevin has shown multiple times, that can score. He's got nowhere to hide. So, let's give him this year to see if he can do it. But if he gets to the end of this year and say he's pointless, I just don't think that he can expect to want to be retained next season.
I mean, we always look at his, driver's junior Formula career when they come in as a rookie. For Mick, it was always take one season to understand the car. And then that kind of second season, after a couple of races, he'd turn it on and he'd go. And as you say, that's
well, he hasn't done it yet, has he?
It's just not there.
And initially, of course, he was learning from Kevin Magnussen, and that experienced driver coming in would only enhance Mick and obviously do great things for Haas as well. But actually also Kevin has now set a benchmark. He's set a standard for Mick to live up to. He's shown what's possible in that car. And then if Mick is continually not reaching that level, it's going to eat away at his own confidence. It's going to creep into his own doubts. And it's, of course, going to become a talking point in the team at a time in which I think 9 drivers are out of contract, some likely to extend. But the driver market, it could get a bit silly in the second half of the season.
could indeed. One driver having a great season, Alex Albon, almost found himself back in the points again in Baku. Brilliant drive.
Yeah, I think Alex is making a habit of making a Sunday afternoon his day of the weekend, which is great because obviously that's where the points are. But he seems to be over-delivering in that car on a very consistent basis. So he's doing everything that Jost Capito wanted when he recruited him after his year as a Red Bull driver, which is reserve driver rather, bringing that experience with him. And I think you can really see that's motivating the team. And he delivered again in Baku, 2 places off, I think it was, the top 10. So it was close again. But if he's doing that with a car that really doesn't deserve to be there, I've got to say I'm super, super impressed with what he's doing.
Disappointing weekend for Nicholas Latifi, however, not aided by small mistake from the team on the grid, just pushing him back a little bit too late. It was Ben just on the front of his car, just pushing him back. Saw it happen. I was like, oh, Ben, mate, come on. Yeah, real disappointment. But from there, it was, whole weekend was over for him, really.
Yeah, and I mean, that's sort of been the story of the season for Nicholas Latifi. He's just not quite there. And I spoke to him earlier, and it's such a shame that Nicholas is coming into, similarly with Lance Stroll, his home race weekend, and he's not performing where he wants to be. And alongside that, I've just mentioned the driver market, of course. Everything's awash with all the rumours that Oscar Piastri will be in that Williams.
Big rumour.
As of next season, there's even talk of him coming in mid-season. I mean, there's a lot of silly chat going on. But I mean, Oscar Piastri to Williams, everyone's shaking their heads here. That was just for him testing the Alpine at Silverstone, not jumping in a Williams to drive Formula One at Silverstone. But anyway, Oscar Piastri to Williams is the big rumour.
Yeah.
And Nicholas Latifi, instead of enjoying his home Grand Prix, which he really wants to do, he's going to have to spend a lot of time batting away questions about his future.
Well, that is almost it for the weekend warm-up. We forgot to say at the top, big news, Australia on the calendar till 2035.
Great
That's
extension,
massive.
isn't it? One of the favourites, if not the favourite on the calendar. Everyone loves going down under.
I've never been. I've never been to Australia.
Well, you've got a long time to do it now.
Obviously, never the Grand Prix, so I'm delighted that I've got,
over a
the
decade.
next 13 years to hopefully change that.
And the potential we're hearing for a South African Grand Prix. We know that Stefano Domenicali was there earlier this week. Very positive noises coming out about South Africa. I was last at Kailami in 2004. It is a proper old school roller coaster circuit. It is so, and they've only got to do very few things to bring it up to F1 level. Couple of gravel traps, couple of catch fences, bit of runoff, couple of grandstands. Bang, they'll be in, and I think it could be great.
I can't wait to go to that race. Like, we've always been saying that we want to make it a proper world championship. So to go to Africa and finally get a race back at Kailami, it's going to be mega.
Would be huge.
It'd be amazing. It'll be huge.
Right, time for predictions. We'll start with you, Laura. Ladies first.
Must we?
We must.
Okay, I'm going to say Ferrari are going to bounce back. The reliability issues are behind them.
Okay.
They're not going to take any sort of grid penalty here.
Okay.
I'm going to say a Charles Leclerc win.
Ooh.
I'm going to say a Sergio Perez P2 and a Max Verstappen P3.
Nice. That's quite sensible.
Shall I have made it more fun?
No. Go
can
safe.
give a bold
go
one
safe.
if you want.
Go for it.
I'm going Checo in.
Yep.
I'm going Charles second and Max third.
Very nice.
We're very boring. We're very obvious.
Yeah, we are a little bit.
What are you going to go?
I am going to go with a Checo win. I am going to go with a Max P2 and a George P3.
So interesting that you're allowing Max to be P2 behind Checo.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's because this is going to be his multi-21 moment. Or not. Thanks so much for tuning in, folks. Enjoy everything from this weekend. Come rain or shine, we will be here. It's likely to be rain. But from all of us...
It's dry for the weekend. It's dry.
Let's fingers crossed. It's changing, though. It is changing every day. It seems...
Don't
okay,
say
I
it.
won't jinx it. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. From Laura, from Lawrence, and from me, that's your lot.